God, I'm still tired. Momocon actually ended 2 days ago, but stuff happened. Momocon, Atlanta, Georgia. Actually, this was the first time I'd been in Georgia in a very long time. I had family that used to live there, and then they moved away. I had 2 flights to get to Georgia. And for the first flight, I was flying out of Columbus. I got there a bit early, went to go grab a snack just from one of the general stores that they have in there. And they had this big TV behind them. And right as I was there was an ad playing which showed, it was a Red Bull ad, I think. And it was just a dude skateboarding around the Columbus airport. That's not telling, considering who I was going to meet up with at the convention. I don't know what is. So, I get the first flight. It's a short flight. So short, in fact, that I looked at the travel itinerary. It said I would take off and then land in the span of about 20 minutes. Because I neglected to think, oh right, there's a time zone change in the middle of this. First thing, I end up all the way at the back of the plane, with a window seat. The guy next to me for the flight spends the entire flight watching One Piece on his phone, which was oddly appropriate given what event I was going to. Then, the unamusing thing happens. In the middle of the flight, I have my headphones on, I'm listening to music. I start hearing, like, some of the flight attendants talking and a message going over the intercom that everybody can hear. So I lift up one of my headphones and I hear the flight attendants asking, if there is a doctor or nurse on board, could you please help us for a moment? And I go, wait a minute, what the fuck? And I look further ahead, and about 9 or 10 rows in front of me, I see 2 flight attendants looking over this one person, and then someone else who was a passenger on the plane, I'm assuming they were a doctor or a nurse, goes back to them and starts talking to this one row of seats. I can't tell what's going on, but this goes on for a while. And thankfully it was a short flight for whatever was happening, but we do land relatively quickly. And then we hear another announcement other than the usual, welcome to Nashville, current time, current temperature, we hope you enjoyed your flight. They say, nobody get off the plane because EMTs need to come on the plane first. We see, I think it was 3 EMTs get aboard the plane and go over to this passenger. Thankfully, whatever was happening, I mean, it sucks that anything happened to this person, but they were able to get up under their own power and were escorted by the EMTs off the plane. They didn't have to stretcher him out or anything, so hopefully that guy was okay. So the first flight takes me to Nashville, Tennessee, which I haven't been in the state of Tennessee in a very long time, and I have never been in the airport for Nashville. So the thing about the Nashville airport is it's under construction. There were lots of barriers up in certain parts of the airport, and I could tell that the terminal I landed in had been recently added. Number one, because outside of what's supposed to be a scenic view, there's just a big rock wall blocking most of it, and some construction equipment nearby. And the other thing is, when I started walking out of that terminal and looked back, I saw a sign specifically telling people who were between flights, there are no more restaurants or places to buy food or drinks beyond this point. Now, something else I observed while I was at the Nashville airport, number one, they really played into the Music City angle for the Nashville airport, because at multiple points, there were people who were performing at some of the restaurants there. It was usually one person with a guitar, although at one point I did see a dude with a piano. Well, keyboard, technically, but, you know. That being said, it was usually country music, so I didn't really give a shit. Another thing that Tennessee/Nashville is famous for, it felt like 1 in every 3 shops there was selling whiskey. Walked by a general store, selling whiskey. There were several little shop locations almost entirely dedicated to whiskey. You go by a like Country Music Hall of Fame place, selling whiskey. Place selling cowboy hats, also selling whiskey. The shoe shine place was also probably selling whiskey. I had a long layover until my next flight. It was about 4 hours. So I'm just walking all over the airport. The Nashville airport is kind of structured in an X shape, where each branch of the X is terminal A, B, C, D, and then there's a larger hub space in the middle, which is also where the security check is for people just arriving at the airport and going to a flight. And then there were also like T terminals, awkwardly placed just slightly off of that middle space. So I'm wandering around a lot. I figure, fuck it, I'll open Pokemon Go and just start doing laps of the airport. But I'm also starting to get hungry, so I'm starting to look at some of the restaurant options in this place. And that's when I'm walking and suddenly I see a statue of Baron Samedi. He is holding a guitar, and there's a big neon sign behind him that says Voodoo Doughnut. I've heard of Voodoo Doughnut, but I'd never actually had anything from Voodoo Doughnut, because there aren't any locations around here. I don't know why there's one in this Tennessee airport, but fuck it, I'm not going to question it. So I decide to eat there. First observation I make, they have fantastic names for their donuts. They have one that is just frosting and crumbled Oreo on top of it, and it's called Dirt. But probably my favorite name for a donut they have is, I can't remember what's on it, but it's called the Old Dirty Bastard. So I decide to eat there, and they also had some tables next to the place where you could eat. I sit down at one of them, and I very quickly realize that the tables are covered in newspaper clippings discussing the deaths of famous musicians. There's one for Prince's death, Aaliyah's death, Johnny Cash's death. There's one for David Bowie, Janis Joplin. I sent the David Bowie one to Kira, which probably not the best thing to do. So I decided to get 2 donuts. One was called the Raised Glazed, which is just a glazed donut. And then I also got something called the Voodoo Doll. The Voodoo Doll is basically an eclair, but it's filled with raspberry jam. It has tiny arms and a face, and there is a pretzel rod stabbed through roughly where the heart would be. And another observation to make about it, it is delicious. I am now very much a fan of Voodoo Doughnut. So I finished that. I'm still killing time at the airport because my flight wound up getting delayed by a little over half an hour. So I sat down and played Monster Hunter Rise at one point. I played Pokemon Go. I had enough time to do 2 full routes through the airport. I end up getting on the plane from the very last spot in the first group of people who board the plane. On my way on the plane, I notice that ahead of me is a family with a baby and a toddler. I get on the plane and I find a window seat kind of close-ish toward the back. I see this family coming my way. This family comes toward me, goes past me, and sits 2 rows behind me. My immediate response, before the next group of people can board, is I move forward 4 or 5 rows. And I grab another window seat that was open. And that was just enough distance that I could just throw my headphones on and not have to deal with any of that shit. So the plane is taxiing for takeoff to do the second leg of the trip to Atlanta. And we're taxiing, and then we just stop. And we do not move for a while. I can see through the window seats that we're at like an intersection through the network of runways, and I see a row of 3 planes, and all of them have to go before us. There's this one small private propeller plane that goes through. There's a United aircraft that goes through. And then there's another Southwest aircraft that goes through. All 3 of these go through, and I see 2 more planes coming down that runway, but thankfully we did not have to wait for them, and we just took off. Well, actually, slightly before that point, I was getting messages about how the flight was going for Casey and Kira. Specifically, what was going on with the person sitting near Casey. And I'm only comfortable talking about this because Casey mentioned this on Blue Sky as it was happening. And let me see if I can pull up exactly what they said. The guy next to me will not stop ripping ass. So apparently somebody on their flight was hotboxing the plane with their own methane, and that led to a brief little exchange of jokes/puns. Delta dealt it. No need to gaslight me about this. It's a methane lab. That was astronomically bad. These jokes are falling flatulent. Time to turn on air out the plane mode. Lots of fun at each other's expense. So anyway, back on my flight. We end up landing in Atlanta at about 7:40-ish. The thing about the Atlanta airport is it is absolutely huge. So huge that they actually make a distinction in the airport between one section that is for international travel and another that's for domestic travel. They have their own terminals, they have their own baggage claims, they have their own pickup and drop off. And part of the side effect of that is you have to go a long way when you land in Atlanta to get to the baggage claim. There was a shuttle you could take, but I already had to kill time anyway because I got in ahead of Casey and Kira. So I said, fuck it, I'll just walk the whole way to the domestic baggage claim. And I had Pokemon Go out with something that was measuring distance to tell exactly how far I was walking. 1 kilometer later, I got to roughly the point where the baggage claim was. I say roughly because there were 2 baggage claims, a north baggage claim and a south baggage claim. So once I figure out which baggage claim is my baggage claim, I go over to the baggage claim. I'm not using the shuttle. I get to the baggage claim that is supposed to be for my flight, and not only are the bags not there, but there also seemingly aren't any people there. And on top of that, the baggage claim carousel isn't moving at all. But the thing on the screen still says, this is where the baggage claim is. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I'm kind of waiting. I start wandering around looking to see, like, did the bags go to a different baggage claim? And I just missed some kind of announcement or something? But no, that wasn't the case. Eventually, I come back to the same baggage claim, and it's no longer displaying my flight, and I have no idea where my or anyone else's bags went. So I have to track down the Southwest baggage office, and when I do, before I even set foot in the office space, I realize this is probably where my bag is. Not because I'm familiar with how, like, any of that works, but because I see a massive pile of luggage in front of the office. So I walk into this place. There was basically, like, a little T-shaped walkway where I could walk in and then walk alongside and see, like, even more of the baggage from the flight that I was on. And I immediately recognized my bag, do an ID check, claim it, and I'm on my way. Now, I knew what airline Casey and Kira were taking into the airport, and it's because of that that I realized I was at the north baggage claim, they're going to be at the south baggage claim. So, I hustle over to the south baggage claim, and almost immediately, I start noticing these people holding signs which have the Momocon logo on them. They're trying to pick up people who are guests for the event. Now, at this time, Casey and Kira have landed, and they are gradually working their way toward the baggage claim. So I figure, fuck it, I'm gonna make a game out of this. Let's see if I can find the person with the sign for Casey and Kira before they can get Casey and Kira. And I did. So, we all meet up, and we arrange for a shuttle, along with some of the other voice guests, to head over to the hotel, which is attached to the event space. The hotel is the OMNI, and it's attached to the Georgia World Convention Center. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's a massive convention center. And it's not terribly far away. So we're all getting our luggage out to the shuttle. It's one of those airport shuttles. It doesn't really have a proper space for storing luggage, so 8 of us get on the shuttle, and then we just cram all of our luggage toward the back. So we're going to the hotel, and then all of a sudden, everything comes to a stop. I look up ahead and see that there are police blocking off the road. I'm not sure why, but that really pisses off the person driving the shuttle, and they're like, oh, the hell with this, and they do a U-ey in the middle of the street. Which is no small feat when you have an airport shuttle as your vehicle. So they make a U-ey, they start taking a different path to get to the OMNI, and then everything stops again, and the road is just completely filled with cars. They're like, okay, what in the hell is going on? So we're just sitting in traffic, very occasionally moving, and I'm looking to try and figure out what's going on, and I notice people walking down the street toward us, and a few of them are wearing basketball jerseys. And I'm thinking, alright, what Atlanta basketball team would be playing? And then it hits me, the Atlanta Dream. It was probably a WNBA game. And I looked it up, and sure enough, there was a home game for the Atlanta Dream that had just recently ended. They lost, by the way. So there's already a ton of people in the streets with us, and then there's a parking garage where even more people are trying to get out on the street, and it is just an absolute mess. But we do eventually manage to get to the OMNI. There were 2 different towers that people can stay in. We managed to get to the correct one. We get in, we're all pretty tired. We're hungry, but we don't want to go particularly far. Fortunately, there was an in-house restaurant. And to explain this restaurant, I need to explain that there's something else that is attached to the event space and the hotel where we're staying, which is the College Football Hall of Fame. I was tempted to go, but I didn't go. There's this one point where there's this hallway, and then there's a couple of like glass case displays for stuff in the College Football Hall of Fame. And then in front of that is a restaurant called Top Draft or something like that. It's like a bar/restaurant. Thus the emphasis on the word draft. Now I should also note that this place was incredibly busy at the time. However, we decide we're going to try and eat here. So we go in, and a couple of the other voice actor guests are already there. So we end up chatting with them for a little bit. We finally managed to get like an open space at the bar itself, and end up getting a couple of burgers. Casey also ends up getting into an extended conversation with one of the voice actor guests who was also at the bar, Lenore Zan. And if that name doesn't ring any bells, they were on the original X-Men cartoon. I believe they voiced Rogue. And in fact, as we were talking to Lenore, there was a Rogue cosplayer sitting right behind her. Just based on my read of the situation, I think it was one of those things where both of them were like, oh, it'll be awkward if I turn around and say something. But from there, we end up just going back up to the hotel room and then relaxing rest of the night and eventually going to sleep. Friday comes, I wake up, Casey already has the PS2 set up and is playing Quake 3. And I should note, because of the issue with the TV in the last hotel we stayed in, there was still a bit of a delay on this TV, but it was nowhere near as bad as it was last time. The delay was far more manageable for playing video games. So we end up playing a little bit of Pro Skater 3 in the midst of, you know, being prepared to go about the day. So we are making our way to the event space, and we very quickly realize there's another event going on at the same time. Which, I mean, it's a huge event space, so they can do that, but we're walking toward the convention space, and we're seeing signs for this robotics and automation conference. So we'll be going through the hallway, and then all of a sudden, there will just be this huge display of, like, little robots performing various tasks. And in fact, the, like, main hall where the convention space really opens up was like half and half signs for Momocon and this robotics conference. Right, so the first thing we do is we end up going to the green room space. And I will say this, the green room is pretty damn big. Possibly one of the largest green rooms that I've seen / been able to go into. And they have like a 4-table setup on one end that is just various kinds of snacks. Granola bars, bags of chips, chocolate and powdered donuts, just all sorts of things. They have a couple of like large fridges that have like sodas and Red Bulls and waters. And they also have another set of tables where there's like various fruits you can grab. There's a coffee set up. And then they also have all these little charging stations stationed like all around the perimeter and at some of the tables in the middle. I'm like, wow, I was actually quite impressed with this space. Also in the green room are some big windows overlooking the exhibit hall space. And that was the first time that I really got to see what that looked like. And holy shit. Let me put it this way, the event space is so big that between the dealers and artists, there were aisle numbers to help you keep track of where the vendors were. I think it went up to like 2,400, 2,500, something like that. Every 100 would be a different aisle. So you'd have aisle 800, 900, 1,000, 111, 1,100. We head down to the space that's called the Walk of Fame. It's where most of the autograph stuff is set up. I say most because there were, in fact, a fair number of guests who had to move to tables elsewhere nearby the Walk of Fame, but technically not part of it, and just have their own autograph set up there. And what was nice about this was, usually what ends up happening is Casey ends up with a table, and they have too much shit to fit on a table. So end up having to request, like, another one, or at least, like, a smaller end table or something to fit everything on. But, thankfully, that did not happen this time. Casey got 2 full-size tables right off the bat, so it made setup really, really easy. And it's a good thing we got down there to set up when we did, too, because there was already a line forming. Now, we started around, I want to say noon? There was supposed to be a panel that Casey was on Friday, but I'll be honest, I'm not sure why Casey was assigned to it, because it was about a type of animation that Casey really doesn't voice for anymore, and maybe did once ever. So they wound up getting moved from that to another panel happening a different day. As a result, that opened things up for more autograph time in case he just said, fuck it, we ball, and signed the entire time. This is also where I have to note how I was dressed for the event.
Ready.
So, I had the Salad Fingers shirt on for Friday, and I was helping run the autograph table, and many people commented on the Salad Fingers shirt. I was pleasantly surprised by how many people not just knew that it was Salad Fingers, but had also watched Salad Fingers and could carry a conversation about Salad Fingers. And David Firth in general. So sometimes I would end up chatting with some of the people who were at the autograph table. And I heard from one guest that things were kind of chaotic in the early going for the con. It technically started on Thursday, but we didn't get in and then have everything set up until Friday. Apparently, and this is just what I heard, the hotel overbooked rooms. And as a result, some people who were supposed to be guests got turned away and led to another hotel that was a little further away. Partial credit for making any effort to get them another place to stay, but at the same time, what the fuck? You overbooked? Now, when I said that Casey went full fuck it, we ball with the autographs, I mean that we just did not stop until pretty much when the exhibit hall closed. It was 6 or 7 hours straight of just signings. And the line never let up. I think the lowest the line got was at one point there were maybe 6 or 7 people in it, but then people kept coming and standing in line. So it was just constant flow of people. There was another thing, which is it wasn't just the two of us. There was a volunteer who was helping to crowd control and helping take photos for if people wanted a photo. We went through 2 different handlers because the one was like, I need to eat and use the bathroom. So at one point, they swapped out for someone else. I think her name was Kat. And she was really helpful the entire weekend. Not just with that, but also helping navigate through the buildings. And there was something I noticed, which is when it got to the point that there were only a handful of people in line, there were taped lines and arrows on the ground that made people do an S shape to get to the front of the line. And even when there weren't that many people in the line, most of the people who came to stand in line would just follow the S shape anyway instead of beelining to the last spot in line. It was a bit odd, but I mean, I guess if you're going to be waiting anyway, then what's the rush? Another thing that happened is, remember Zenkai Con when we got desperate and wound up putting Chilchuck prints that we got from Artist Alley on the table, and then realized later on, oh wait, these are basically feet pics. We still had some of those. And at multiple times, people would comment on the feet pics. If Casey was signing a bunch of stuff or in a deep conversation, I would just say, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to tell them the story of where these prints came from. Also on the first day, Casey sold out of the prints for the Monster Prom, Monster Camp, Monster whatever characters, which sucked because there were other people who came up asking if they had anything Monster Prom. And I had to be like, yeah, but they sold out. Lesson learned. Always stock up on the Monster Prom stuff. When things finally do end, we basically end when the exhibit hall closed. So we didn't really have time to go around and explore anything in the dealer space or the artist alley or anything like that. On the recommendation of Casey's agent, all of us took a ride out to this local place called the Vortex. It's a bar and burger place. It is 21 and over only. We go in, and the first thing I hear, music-wise, is Shout at the Devil, Motley Crue. I'm like, alright, decent music choice. And then I hear Cowboys from Hell by Pantera. And I'm thinking, okay, if they do this one more time, then this is going to become a pattern, and I think I know what the pattern is. And I can't remember what the next song was, but I remember hearing that and thinking, alright, you guys are just playing a Guitar Hero playlist, aren't you? 2 minutes to midnight, that's what it was. Thank you, Casey. By the way, Casey at various points in the day was humming Limelight by Rush. And then guess what started playing in the Vortex? Limelight by Rush. This place has a lot of unique designs for burgers. And I see some of these and I say, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna get a little adventurous. So yeah, here are some of the names of the burgers. Fat Elvis, Four Horsemen, Hell's Fury, Holy Guacamole, Pickle Rick, Kamana Wanaleya, and then there's the one that I got, the Zombie Apocalypse. Burger topped with barbecue pork, spicy honey barbecue, pepper jack cheese, and a sunny side up egg on Texas toast. And you know what? I saw some people who were like using a fork and knife to try and eat their burgers. I said, nah, fuck that. I grab mine with both hands, pick it up, take a bite, and immediately, like, barbecue sauce shoots out. The runny inner bits of the egg start running out. It's just a total mess all over my plate. It's spilling all over the fries that I had. And I didn't give a shit. Also, with my fries, I got a cup of honey mustard sauce. You know, for dipping. And I see this honey mustard cup. And I remember what I did with the cheese at Game On Expo. And Casey's like, oh no, you're not. And I did. I picked it up and shot the whole thing.
Against my better judgment, he's about to down a whole cup of honey mustard. Take it away, Scott. You were raised on the honey mustard.
I was raised on the honey mustard, bitch!
Now eventually, this does become too much, and napkins can only do so much for a burger like this. So I go, I gotta go and wash my hands. So I track down the bathroom for this place, go in, and I'm just washing my hands. I need a very long time to wash my hands because this was I was up to my wrists in like egg yolk and barbecue sauce and burger grease. And it's as I'm washing my hands that the stalls are behind me. I see this dude come out of the stall. I'm not looking directly at him. I see him in my peripheral vision. He steps out of the stall, stops, looks down, and he's got his hands down around his crotch area and he's fiddling with his pants. And I figure, alright, you probably should have zipped up before coming out of the stall, but whatever. I'm still washing my hands. I look up 10 seconds later, he's still doing it. I'm like, okay. I continue trying to wash shit off of my hands. Look up another 10 seconds later, he's still doing it. I'm not looking directly at him, so I don't know what exactly he's doing, but it's an uncomfortable thing to see in your peripheral vision. Particularly when this guy was like, maybe 7 feet behind me. So I finally get my hands cleaned off, and I turn around to leave. This guy has finally stopped fiddling with his pants, but as soon as he does that, he looks in the mirror, and then runs his hands through his hair. And as I'm leaving, I see him turn to leave behind me. There's a bit to unpack with this. Because keep in mind, it wasn't just like he used the standing urinal and then ran his hands through his hair and then left without washing. He was in the stall. We eventually end up going back to the hotel. We can't really find anything on TV, Usually what will end up happening is we'll just throw on South Park and then just leave that playing until we fall asleep. This time, however, Comedy Central insisted in showing on a shit ton of Family Guy and or Rick and Morty, so that option was out the window. And what we ended up doing instead was just flipping around channels. I can't remember if this was when, no, I think that was a different day. But we end up settling on this show where, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the Osborne family. Ozzy, Sharon, and their son. And they're reviewing, like, spooky paranormal videos, and then rating how spooky they are. Or, like, if they believe what's going on in the video. And it's hilarious, because sometimes Ozzy just clearly does not give a shit about what's going on. So we try going to sleep, and then I end up waking up around midnight. Keep in mind, we're on the 28th floor, the very top floor of the tower that we're in. And from our vantage point, I can sort of see the front of the convention center, where there's this big courtyard area. I hear noise outside. I get up, look out the window, and I look down at the corner of the courtyard. There are a shit ton of people outside there. I did not realize going into this that there's a bit of a party scene around Momocon, and that particular space is often where, like, a lot of the partying takes place. And they just get going and going and going into the night. That leads into Saturday. I am awake at about 7 in the morning, far and away the first person who's awake. So I figure I'm just going to make good use of my time. I basically get ready for the day. Shower, brush my teeth, change clothes, stretch a bit. This day, in terms of what shirt I was wearing, was Bird Up Day. So I throw on my my Terminal Montage Bird Up shirt, and I'll say this now. That shirt constantly got people commenting on it. And they weren't just saying, oh, haha, Bird Up, funny, or, oh, haha, Kuliyaku, funny. There were people who knew exactly what that was from. Many people who knew exactly what that was from. Because I'd be walking around and I'd hear people going, oh, Terminal Montage. Just all day this happened. I will also note that the Robotics and Automation Conference is done. And the event space is just all Momocon now. That being said, there were still many signs up trying to direct people to the Robotics and Automation Conference. I also heard that, well, actually I got a message from the Momocon app, which I actually downloaded for this event, and which at various points said that Casey had a panel at like 2:30 in the morning. Not sure what that was about. But I remember seeing one message that the shuttles to the convention were going to be delayed/disrupted for a bit because of a parade that was happening in Atlanta. And as near as I could tell, this was the, I think it was the Carnival parade. Don't quote me on that. Now, at this point, there were enough people at the convention that they have to start, like, really enforcing lines for the escalators. But it's not just because of the amount of people. It's also because there were many escalators that were simply not working. So throughout the event space, you would see these huge blue barriers erected around certain escalators that just nobody could use. So it ended up, like, bottlenecking people into fewer escalators, so that just made the lines for them longer. This time the signings, I think, started at about 11 a.m. and they could only go for about an hour and a half because the panel Casey got moved onto was going to happen in about that much time. It was a Bleach panel. Because for those who don't know, Casey voiced Giselle in Bleach 1,000 Year whatever. I don't really watch Bleach. We meet up with Johnny Young Bosch, who was also at the con and on that panel. By the way, Johnny Young Bosch, pretty chill guy. We meet up and we end up being guided through all these back hallways and service elevators to get to the panel space without anybody seeing us. We're all behind this like screen with projectors on it. We realize we're there. The panel is starting in less than 10 minutes, and the third person on the panel, David Vincent, is nowhere to be seen. So we're like, oh shit, did he get caught, like, with a bunch of people in his autograph line, and he's, like, trying to get through them real quick before going to the panel? I think that was what ended up happening, but we get to 5 minutes before the panel. The moderator and staff have already gone over, like, how sound's going to work for the panel, what the structure is, what some of the questions are going to be, and David Vincent is still not there. 2 minutes before the panel, David Vincent is still not there. And at this point, I just say to everyone, okay, if he doesn't make it, one of us has to pretend to be David Vincent. And then it's like 30 seconds before the panel starts, and finally David Vincent comes in through the back door. He made it just in time. So all three of them go up on stage. I'm not sure why it was set up like this, but there was a computer monitor that was set up like very close to where one of the guests would be sitting. So for the first couple minutes of the panel, we could see the projection showing the guests on stage. Most of Casey's face was just completely blocked by a computer monitor until like one of the staffers came up on stage, moved it away, and then everyone could see him. The panel's going fairly normally. It's about what you would expect for one of these types of panels. And then fan Q&A gets opened up. And at first, it's going fairly normally. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I think there were like 2 or 3 questions left. And then this person gets on the microphone and starts talking about Ichigo and their personal sexual awakening from watching... it was Bleach or Trigun. It was very rambly, so it was hard to follow what exactly this person was saying. But I just remember the words sexual awakening blaring out through the room, and I was sitting backstage with the handlers and a couple of staffers. And when that phrase came through over the speakers, all of us just shot up wide-eyed looking at each other like, wait, what the fuck did they just say? And from that point, things went, like, really off the rails. And I have a feeling that, like, it was hard to tell because I think he, like, lowered his head in the midst of all this, but it would not surprise me if Johnny's face was, like, bright red. And then later on, it goes into, like, fan-fiction-y crossover universe stuff from another person's question, and I'm like, what the fuck happened to this panel? Anyway, they survived that, and then we went back to autographs for another length of time. And in that little stretch, because it was pretty narrow time gap between that and a second panel Casey was on. But in that little stretch, I noticed something that I had never seen before, which is somebody bought a print and then almost left the table without getting it signed. Like, I've seen people forget things at the table, like forgetting their phones, even forgetting a print that they just got signed. But I've never seen someone buy the print, go over to Casey, talk to them, and then leave without getting it signed. Although there was one person who asked, could I just buy the print and then not get it signed? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, but why? So we decided to end that part of the signing a little bit early. This is one of the rare points where Casey and I split off and do different things. Casey ends up going to the room, and then I stay in the exhibit hall space, and I'm just weaving through the aisles, looking for anyone who's selling video games. And unfortunately, I mean, there were game vendors there, but there weren't really like any vendors that had like a significant selection of video games. A lot of it was like collector places that had a video game section and then a bunch of other shit, or it was someone who just was doing a yard sale and just had a bunch of video games in this one little tiny booth. There were a couple of decent things, but there wasn't really anything particularly attention-grabbing. Unless you were into imports, then there were some okay options for that. Although there was one vendor that had some import video games, but the thing I noticed them the most for was they had a complete Laserdisc set of Evangelion. It was 3 boxes, and it felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Now, as this is going on and I'm scouting for game vendors, I'm also on a bit of a mission for my wife, who anytime I go to one of these will usually ask me, just keep an eye out for like Monster Hunter or Initial D stuff. And as I'm going around, I noticed this vendor who was selling car models for Initial D. And obviously the thing that they had the most of was the 8.6, the Trurino, the car that the main character drives. However, there's something else. Because they have a model of the Cappuccino, which is this really small convertible style car. Like if you think the Miata's small, you need to see the Cappuccino. And they had, I think that was the very last one. But I ended up getting that for her. And that was fun trying to take back. I'll get into that later. But I'm going around and I'm actually trying to write down the aisles and the general locations of these video game places so that we can get back to them later. And as I'm going deeper and deeper into like the main body of the exhibit hall, it feels like it's getting hotter and the air is getting heavier. And I'm actually starting to get like headaches, a little nauseous. And I think I got to like aisle 1900 before I said, okay, fuck it, I can't do this anymore. I gotta get out of here. But I did manage to jot down a few places that we could end up looking at. It was also then that I realized I was running low on time and I didn't have like too much time in which to catch up with Casey ahead of their panel. It was a Dungeon Meshi panel. And Sungwon Cho was there and Damien Haas were there. And all 3 of them were going to be part of this. So they were at the green room, and I had to try and navigate my way from somewhere in the exhibit hall up to where the green room is. And I couldn't remember exactly how to get there. I remembered like the floor it was on, but I couldn't remember where it was in relation to the exhibit hall exit that I took. So it took me a bit, but I just barely managed to catch Casey and the others right as they were about to head over to that panel. So again, we take the side door, we end up going through a bunch of back hallways, taking the elevator, and we end up at the panel space, which the panel space for this was not like the other one. The other one, you went backstage and there was like a little elevated stage setup, projector screens, stuff like that. We go to this place and the first thing we see is a big ass curtain right in front of us. Because when I say backstage for this, I mean like theater backstage. This place had curtains, there was a stage left and stage right, and the size of this room was fucking gigantic. I couldn't see from my vantage point just how many people there were in this space. Oh, he T-posed! That paladin's trying to establish dominance. Dominance spelled with a T. This room that the panel was taking place in could apparently accommodate like 1,000, maybe a bit more people. And for the panel, it was packed. think Casey said, like, because of the stage lights, they couldn't see how many people there were, and it was probably a good thing. Now, at that point, a bunch of the other handlers had gone off to this, like, space where they could just chill, hang out, rest. I stayed backstage. There was exactly one chair backstage, and I wound up just sitting in that and just playing video games while listening to what was happening with the panel. So anyway, that panel goes over well. We end up making our way back to autographs for the brief period before the hall ends up closing. Once we wrap up, we start walking to the other side of the exhibit hall because we heard that there was someone over there who wanted Casey to sign their car. It was apparently an Eva-themed car. As we're walking over there, we find these other people who are also doing vehicle-based, like, quote-unquote cosplay, I guess you'd call it. There's a Back to the Future DeLorean. There were multiple Fallout-themed vehicles. There was the Vespa from Fooly Cooly with a Rickenbacker next to it. A midnight blue, left-handed 4003 Rickenbacker. Which, honestly, I think I was more excited for that than the Vespa. And beyond that, we get to the cars with, like, all the various paint jobs and wraps on them that are anime-inspired. We start asking, is there someone here who, you know, has an Evangelion-inspired car or design or whatever? And we end up getting directed toward the opposite end of this row of cars. And there is, in fact, an Eva-inspired car there. It is a red Mazda Miata with a wrap on it based around Asuka from Neon Genesis Evangelion. And the owner of this is, like, so psyched to have Casey there to sign their car. Their car had already been signed by a couple other members of the Evangelion cast. But if I remember correctly, I think Casey was the first Shinji to sign this vehicle. Just as we were, like, BSing around, I, like, have a moment with the person who owns the Miata and show her my wife's Miata, because Tiger has one of the older Miatas that has the pop-up headlights, whereas this Miata has the, like, headlights that are set in the hood. And then, just jokingly, because it's a Miata and it's Asuka based, I throw out the name Miasuka. And somehow that name stuck. So once we finally worked out all the car stuff, we're like, okay, we gotta get the hell out. And we get out, we decide that we're just gonna order a pizza. Kira also DoorDashes some stuff from, I can't remember what restaurant it was, but it wasn't pizza. There's this little cafe in the hotel that I buy a bottle of Coke from. And I just gotta say, why is it that we're in Atlanta, where the Coca-Cola bottling plant is, and the fridges, seemingly everywhere I went, there was a whole shit ton of Coke Zero and almost no regular Coca-Cola? Anyway, I do buy a regular bottle of Coca-Cola from that hotel cafe, and I'm gonna have it with the pizza. Pizza comes, we get it out to the hotel room. There's pepperoni on it, which I'm not a fan of, but this was the kind of pizza that if you just pinch the edge of the pepperoni and then lift it slightly, the entire thing comes off, and the cheese doesn't come with it. So whatever, not a huge issue for me. But what was a huge issue, I opened my bottle of Coke, and I don't hear a fizz. I take a sip. It is almost completely flat. This was a new bottle of Coke. Casey sees this and goes, "What the hell?" Closes it up tightly and just starts shaking it. And then a few seconds later, holds it still, and there's practically nothing. So Casey is like, "Nah, fuck this, let's go." we head back down to the cafe, and just by sheer chance, we happen to catch the manager of this place out on the floor. We end up going straight to them. Casey's like, we just bought this from this place like 20 minutes ago, and it's completely flat. It probably wasn't even 20 minutes. It was more like 10. And fortunately, this manager is really understanding. He just says, yeah, sure, grab another one. So I get another regular Coke, which I think there were like 2 or 3 of them left in the fridge at that point, versus the 30 Coke Zeros next to them. And yes, I opened it, it fizzed, it was carbonated, everything's fine. Now, part of the responsibilities for what I end up doing at these events is I have to keep track of sales. And that includes keeping track of not just the charges, but also physical cash transactions. And as a result, if a lot of people pay in cash, you end up with, like, basically a wad of bills. And at this event, there were a fair number of people who paid in cash. I'm going through this, doing totals for the day, and I comment to Casey, like, I get all the bills in a stack, and I go to Casey, I hand the money over to them, I go, here, feel this. I just want you to feel the girth. And I knew what I was saying. I knew how it could be construed. And I need to make a quote image for that. Like a black and white inspirational quote image with like cursive script of I just want you to feel the girth, SCXCR below it. So we go through the pizza. There's still some time in the day. And while the exhibit hall is closed, the game room space is not. So we decide we're going to check out the game room space. The problem with that is the game room is all the way at the opposite end of the exhibit hall, which means to get there, we have to go from our hotel room down 24 floors. Then we go down another 2 floors on the escalator because there's no floor dedicated to that for the guest elevators. Go through this hallway along the side of the courtyard of the convention center, down another narrow hallway, go into the front of the convention space. Then we go down an escalator, down another escalator, walk a whole lot. By a whole lot, I mean like a solid 7 to 8 minutes of walking. Down another escalator, and then we can get into the game room space. You finally get there, and the first thing you see when you get there is the arcade space. And there was a fairly decent mix there. They had like a line of retro machines, stuff like Asteroids. I think Original Punch-Out was there. Hang On was there. There were actually like 2 or 3 Yu Suzuki games in a row in that space. Space Harrier was there, that was one of them. There was a row of pinball machines in another portion. They had the like Japanese rhythm game section. They had, I think it was Time Crisis 3 there, among a couple of other shooters. They had some UFO catchers. And then, the thing that really caught my eye, they had OLLIE King, which is a game I've known about, but I've never been able to play. So for those who don't know, OLLIE King is a skateboarding game. If you just saw the cabinet at a distance, you would swear it's Top Skater, but no, it's OLLIE King. The thing about this game is the score for it was composed by a certain Hideki Naganuma, a guy who would go on to be a little more known for Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future. So I played that for the first time, and it's very different from Top Skater. There's a bit more emphasis on doing tricks. There's grinding in it, and the grinding has a balance gauge, sort of like what the later Pro Skater games would use. And I just hopped on, started playing, and had fun with it. I'm glad it's not one of those games that I admired from afar and then finally played it and it sucked. From there, we wound up going over to the retro game space. what it was it was a bunch of TVs with different consoles, and they basically had flash carts or hard drives with a bunch of emulatable titles for all of the consoles. And we ended up settling on one that they did for the PS1, which had Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 on it. And the thing is, we decided we're going to play on the School 2 level, and we're going to play with all of the stats lowered as much as possible. And it was so hard to do anything. If I remember correctly, Casey came up 5 points short of 400,000. I think we were playing on a 10-minute time limit, by the way. So once things start to peter out in that area, which, by the way, that was just like one part of the gaming section. It kept going for a very long time. They had a streamer section, which I'm still not sure what exactly that was. There was a VR gaming section, and we also saw people who were on roller skates rolling around in this area. Apparently there was a like skate rink. I still don't know where exactly it was, but it was funny seeing these people in this open space with not a lot of people around them on roller skates. And like 30 or 40 feet away, you saw these security people going like, yeah, I know there's a skate rink, but do we punish them? Can we do that? Are we allowed to do that? What's the rules for this? It keeps going even further, and then there's a like trading card game section. And then it keeps going even further, and there's a tabletop gaming section. It's like the amount of real estate that this one event was covering. Momocon is easily the largest convention I've gone to. In terms of like square footage of event space. And I haven't seen the attendance figures yet, but based on last year's attendance figures, it's also the largest in terms of number of attendees. Because I think last year they had like 55,000 people attend. So we're making the long walk back to our hotel room. And along the way, we go past the courtyard space where we saw all the people partying the night before. This is close to midnight, and there's even more people out there. And Casey's like, you know what? Let's just go out there just for a little bit, just to see the vibe, you know. So, and we do. We find a door and end up going outside, and we are in the courtyard space, kind of like on the periphery. And it is just a mass of humanity. Tons of different music is blaring. People are dancing, like knocking beach balls around. There's a guy on a saxophone playing shit. We go past this one area where there's a bunch of guys standing in a circle chanting random shit. Like, I think the first time we walked past them, like, I had just heard a bunch of people chanting, I got a big stick, woo! I got a big stick, woo! I got a big stick, woo! So we are gradually moving along the edge of the space, and then all of a sudden, some lady just ends up slamming into my side, and I just hear, sorry, and then we just keep moving. I didn't see who it was, but according to Casey, it was an Asuka cosplayer, which, weird coincidence, given the situation, and what had happened throughout the day. Casey ends up getting stopped. I mean, this happened several times throughout the event, but they got stopped out in this courtyard space because someone thought they were cosplaying Kenny from South Park. Casey just has this big orange jacket that they'll wear wherever, and it just happens to make them look like Kenny from South Park. We finally, eventually, make our way out of the space, back into the hotel. We get back into the hotel room, and Kira's there, and on the TV is, I think, Back to the Future 3, because of course Kira would find something like that. And that leads into the Sunday of the convention, which, once again, I'm up before everybody else. And we end up getting there a bit earlier than when we said autographs would start. So we used that time to scope out a bunch of vendors. In the process, we end up tracking down this one vendor and artist alley that one of the people who came through the autograph line suggested we check out. So Casey meets up with them, and a few booths away, I find this one place with some little prints that I like their design, and they had a couple characters I recognized. They had like a 3 for $10 deal for these little, like, maybe 6x8 prints. One of them was a Fooly Cooly print. One of them was a Jet Set Radio print. It was gum specifically, so I got that for my wife. And the third one was a teary-eyed Shinji from Evangelion. So I got those, and then I gave the Shinji one to Casey. And Casey's like, where did you get this from? And I point out the vendor, and they're like, okay, well, now I gotta say something to him. So they go over and introduce themselves as themselves and say that they voiced Shinji in Evangelion. And the artist's jaw drops. And one of the adjacent vendors says, yep, that's Shinji's voice actor. And they were like, yo, no way. And he was just super appreciative. They got a photo together in front of the booth. And I think got his day off on a good start. Now, I will note, during this event, ComboBreaker is happening. I was supposed to go to ComboBreaker, but due to certain reasons, unfortunately, many of them financial, it was actually not worth it to go to ComboBreaker, even though I'd already bought the badge for it. Like, yes, I'm going to a convention, but I'm ultimately working at this convention, whereas if I went to ComboBreaker, everything's volunteer, and cost for like room and board would actually be higher if I did that, so it unfortunately wasn't an option this year. However, in solidarity, I was wearing my Bloody Roar Hyper Beast dual shirt, the one that I got from a Japan auction. So I'm wearing that while working the autograph table. And I'm like, people recognize the Terminal Montage shirt, they recognize the Salad Finger shirt. I'm expecting no one to pick up on what this is. But about half hour into autographs, one of the guys comments on my shirt and he's like, oh, hey, Bloody Roar, they need to do something with that now. That was a fun game. And I'm like, sir, you just made my day. So the line was pretty small for Sunday. I don't think it ever got beyond like 8 or 9 people, but it was a consistent line. Meaning, like 1 or 2 people would come through the autograph line, and then as they did that, 1 or 2 more people would show up at the back of the line. It didn't actually get completely empty until really late in the day. This was another one of those times where Casey was just in fuck it, we ball mode and just wasn't taking breaks, except for one time when a Marcille cosplayer came up and commented on like they were going to get something, I think their staff signed by Damien Haas, but his line was crazy the entire weekend. And Casey's like, fuck it, we're on a mission now, and goes with this Marcille cosplayer over to Damien and gets them to sign it. I think that was also one of the times where there was a booth for a cosplay guest that I wanted to check out. But in the few times I checked them, they weren't there. Saturday, they were doing cosplay judging all day. Sarah Spaceman is her name. I found her through like the cosplay horror stories videos that she does around Halloween, and just started watching those other videos that she does, and slowly getting me back into cosplay, even though I kind of can't afford to do it. So I was going to check out their booth, and while Casey was on this mission, I went over to where Sarah Spaceman would be set up, and booth was completely torn down. They were already gone. So, sucks that I couldn't hook up with them, but oh well. Now, I said that Casey was not stopping for food, but at one point, Andrew, their agent, he knows that Casey likes soft pretzels. And there was a super pretzel vendor adjacent to the dealer space, not far away. So he goes over and he gets a couple of soft pretzels for us. We're like, okay, cool. We put them on this chair in between us. And Casey was so in the zone that they just did not stop to eat the pretzel. It was like completely cold by the time they finally got to it. Also, while the autographs are going on, more people are commenting on the Chill Chuck feet pics. Which, by the way, at this point, there's only one left. And before the day was over, there were no feet pics left. Somebody bought it. So the curse of the Chill Chuck feet has been lifted, and we can all move on from that chapter. Now, we just kept going and going and going, and it's the final day of the event, and the time comes where the exhibit hall closes. It felt like 30 seconds after the exhibit hall officially closed, they went into complete teardown mode. And when I say complete teardown, I mean, like, bay doors opened and people were driving trucks into the event space to immediately start disassembling everything and loading up unsold stock. And as that's going on, some of the staff people, the convention center staff people, are going around and dismantling a bunch of like pipe and drape setups. There's a scissor lift going around taking down the banners and signs for all the guests. As this is going on, I'm on my phone because the time that the exhibit hall closes is supposed to be the time when ComboBreaker's Bloody Roar Extreme tournament is supposed to start broadcasting the top 4. I check around the time that it's supposed to start, and it hasn't started yet. Okay, whatever. More shit's getting disassembled around us. Tables are going down. More trucks are driving past us. I check my phone again like 10-15 minutes later. The event still hasn't started. More time goes by. Basically, all the tables around us are taken down, and there's maybe like 6 banners left. Unfortunately, one of them is Casey's and one of them is Kira's, so we have to wait for those before we can leave. We've got all the prints packed up, all the signs packed up, bunch of shit in the suitcase, all the stuff that fans had given Casey packed up, markers packed up. Banners finally come down. We fold those up, pack those up. Everything's packed up. We can finally leave the event space. I check my phone. It's like half an hour later. The event still hasn't started. And not to drag it out, but the event didn't start until like an hour after it was supposed to. And I found out why. But I'm going to save that for when I do the ComboBreaker recap. Because it's kind of a stupid reason. But the event does start. I didn't know what to expect from it. So the top 4 was Jerry, as you would expect. Dom made top 4 again. And then Dizzy Pig and Dacid Bro, who I talked about Dacid Bro in the 2023 video when he made top 4. And Dizzy Pink just barely missed top 4 the previous year. Dom loses to Jerry the first time, but ends up working his way back to face Jerry again in the grand finals. I'll go more in depth on this in the ComboBreaker recap, but in my head I'm thinking, alright, Dom has already lost to Jerry once, and the only person who ever like took a set point off of Jerry was Nan. Dom still hasn't done this. This could be a very quick finals. It was not a very quick finals. Dom actually managed to reset the bracket and then push Jerry to the absolute limit. Like the maximum number of points possible to decide who the winner was. And even though Jerry still won, it was one single move going Dom's way could have completely changed the outcome of the entire tournament. I was like watching this on my phone, and I'm just calling out updates on the scores to Casey and Kira, and I just remember Casey going, he was playing too much Fortnite, he's gone soft. We're still kind of winding down from the convention, and Casey puts Tony Hawk 3 into the PS2 and starts messing around with the airport level for that game. In the midst of doing this, Casey finds a way to vault their character over the wall at the very beginning of the level, which causes the character to, like, they're still on the skateboard, but they start, like, rotating in weird ways. It's like they're still floating in air, but, like, they're still level with the ground, and they can, like, rotate in all sorts of different directions. And the whole time, the game is going... Why do you have to do this every fucking con?
Fly me to the moon.
And if you do this just right, your character ends up going out to the street beyond this point and can just pinball back and forth endlessly. And that's where we figured out that the numbers that tell you how many degrees you've rotated goes up to at least 6 digits. I'm tempted to do an experiment with that to see how high I can get that number on my copy of Pro Skater 3. So we are being really lazy with our food options again. We figure, you know what, the con's over. There's not really any other events going on anytime soon. So, let's just go back to that Top Draft sports bar restaurant place and eat there again. We do. It's like not even half full. So we're able to find a table easy, order some food. Andrew, Casey's agent, meets up with us too and has some drinks. Now, from where we're sitting, there are these big glass doors and windows showing an outside, like, patio area with a little covered roof over it, overlooking the rest of the city. This is on, like, the 4th floor of the building, by the way. No, 2nd floor. 2nd floor, yeah. So it's not that far off the ground. And it's getting dark, but Casey and I both noticed that, like, from some streetlights, there's a bit of rain starting to come down. And we figure, okay, we saw weather reports saying that it was going to rain here, but I can't imagine it's going to be anything too terrible. There was a massive storm that rolled in. The wind picks up, it starts blowing like napkins and menus around the balcony area, and the employees had to, like, scramble to save the menus from blowing off the side and into the street. Now I'm seeing all of this and going, okay, this is kind of bad, and the rain is starting to get heavy to the point that, like, when you look in the distance, like, the buildings that are further away start to get hazy. Like, it's actually starting to affect, like, your ability to see a decent distance away. I'm like, okay, this is getting worse. And then, because this is a sports bar, there are a bunch of TVs set up to show different sporting events. And eventually, the feeds for all of the TVs go out. There was a brief period where, like, everything went out except the motorcycle racing. And we're like, come on, motorcycles, you can do it. They couldn't do it. They went out too. Lightning's coming down. The rain's getting harder. So, for a while, the atmosphere in this place just completely took a nosedive. Now, after a little bit, the rain does start to let up, and the feeds for all of the televisions start to come back. And we finish our food, and I will say, they have fries at this place, but they're not, like, French fries, or curly fries, or crinkle cut fries. They basically look like, if you've ever seen the drill for, like, drilling oil wells, they look like that, but they're in fried potato form. So we finished that, and we're heading back to a restaurant, and there are still some signs up for not necessarily Momocon, but just general signs for like where stuff is around the hotel. And we eventually find this sign where I actually posted about this on Blue Sky, but the first lines for it are "You belong here. Restrooms." And obviously it's like restrooms are located in the whatever. But I photograph it so that all you see is "You belong here, restrooms," and then I made some dumb shit post about it because I still have the brain of a 7-year-old. Now we can't actually like do too much back at the room because we're flying back, like all of us are flying back the Monday after the event. We're flying back on different airlines and at different times. Another unfortunate thing is due to a combination of flying out on a holiday and Atlanta traffic being what it is, and an early flight time for Casey and Kira, we have to go to sleep and then wake up to catch a shuttle at, I think it was 7:30 in the morning. We were supposed to be on a shuttle with some other, like, voice actor guests, but apparently they took an earlier one just to make sure that they got to the airport in time, even though they were on the same flight as Casey and Kira. We wound up falling asleep watching the Monaco GP F1, but that was after we found an old replay of a classic Tetris tournament on ESPN News, which was one of the last things I expected to find. Like ESPN 2 in particular would play a lot of the more niche or oddball sporting events, but they've kind of gone away from that, and it's kind of made ESPN worse. One of the many things that's made ESPN worse, if we're being honest. So the Monday morning comes, and I am trying to figure out how I'm going to pack things, because I do not want that model car of the Cappuccino in my checked bag where it could potentially get tossed around and beat up. With Casey's help, I end up, like, ironically, Tetrising my messenger bag to fit the model car, my Switch dock, a shit ton of cables, a bunch of markers and pens and shit that I use to help with the signings, and the art prints that I bought. It was a tight fit, but it fit. We get to the shuttle at 7:30 in the morning, and it was bizarre seeing the Omni just completely empty. We get the shuttle, and traffic actually wasn't too much of a hassle. And the airport wasn't even that far from where we were staying. Kind of over-prepared on that front. Casey and Kira get checked in for their flight, and I go to check in for my flight, and I can't. Because Southwest has a rule where you're not allowed to, like, get your bags checked and everything until, I think it's 4 hours before your departure time. And I got there like 4.5 hours before departure. So by the time I'm able to check in, Casey and Kira have already boarded their plane. So I can't meet up with them again. We did a just-in-case goodbye before then, but still sucks that we couldn't meet up on the other side of security. So I go through security. I just have a bunch of time to wait until my flight again. I still had 3 hours to go until my flight. And I didn't really have a proper breakfast. But what I wound up doing was I found an Auntie Anne's while I was there. And said, you know what, close enough. So we're boarding my plane, which, again, is going to Nashville and then back to Columbus. So we're starting to board the plane for Nashville. We're almost through my group. I am like 3 spots away from getting on the plane. All of a sudden, the Southwest staffer who's scanning everyone's boarding pass looks down the like tunnel leading to the plane and just like speed walks down it. And I'm thinking, well, wait, what happened? And I'm waiting for him to come back. And I'm still waiting. And still waiting. And still waiting. And he's not coming back. And then suddenly this loud, like, tone/alarm starts playing from a speaker over the top of the door leading down the hall and onto the plane. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on? This guy comes running back, and he's like, I didn't realize that was going off. Closes the door to the boarding hallway, opens it, that shuts it off. And then he just starts scanning boarding passes like nothing happened. And I still have no idea what caused that delay. So this flight was really quick. Really quick as in, due to a mix of the distance and apparently some kind of wind the plane could use to its advantage, the flight was 37 minutes from takeoff to touchdown. And we're back in the Nashville airport. I have many more hours to kill before I can take the final flight home. But I'm in the Nashville airport again, so I say, fuck it, I'm going to Voodoo Doughnut again. And that time I had another raised glaze, and I also had the dirt donut. Because I have several more hours to kill, I get back on Pokemon Go and just start walking everywhere. I see more people performing on guitars and keyboards throughout the airport. It's worth noting that one of the Pokemon that was popping up a lot is Seal. Seal is my favorite Pokemon. I have a lot of, like, a boys club of Pokemon, which is like Hitmonlee, Gengar, Articuno, and a few others. But Seal is like the number one. So I'm happy that all these Seal are popping up, but in all the time I've been playing Pokemon Go, I have never gotten a shiny for Seal. And it's about, I want to say, 10 or 15 minutes before I start boarding that I finally get a shiny one to appear and I catch it. And before anyone asks, no, I am never evolving that shit. Also, its stats are terrible, but it's a Seal, so I love it anyway. Now, for this flight home, I'm like so far back in the boarding order that I think like 140 people got on the plane before I did. As this is happening, they're scanning all the people's boarding passes to get on the plane, while I am scanning the crowd to see who do I not want to sit near if I can possibly avoid it. And as I'm doing this, I realize there are 5 babies that got on the plane before I did. So as I get scanned and I'm starting to go down the rows of seats, I am doing a head count for all the babies I can see. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I think I'm in the clear if I sit behind like this particular row. And at this point, it was basically all middle seats. So I'm just looking for a middle seat that is far enough back that with my headphones on and music playing, I won't really notice if a baby starts crying. For the record, a baby was already crying. Because it's a baby on an airplane, they don't know what's going on. Do not bring babies on an airplane. Although, actually, I'm kind of lying, because I was just assuming I would end up with a middle seat. But somehow, I ended up with an aisle seat. And there was no one in the middle seat next to me. And it looks like they have ended boarding, but we're still not taking off and we're still not going through the pre-takeoff procedures. Then a couple more passengers get on the plane. And I'm thinking, okay, here goes the middle seat. And they don't take it. And I'm thinking, with as many people as are on this plane, am I really going to have a free middle seat next to me? But they're still not going through the pre-takeoff stuff. And then 2 more people get on the plane and one of them takes the middle seat. I mean, it wasn't a huge deal because the person who sat next to me was this older lady who was just reading the entire flight. And it was a short flight anyway. But still, you kind of hope for those moments where, like, there's no one next to you, so you can just, like, relax, stretch your legs a bit into the seat next to you. We wound up landing just after 9 p.m., I think. I was just kind of in a weird headspace because I was exhausted from both the event and the amount of travel that I was having to do and having to wait in airports and shit like that. I was getting off the plane, and the first thing I hear after stepping out of the plane is this Southwest crew member, like he's reciting prose for a poetry slam, saying the lyrics to the theme for Gilligan's Island. He's going, "If not for the bravery of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. The minnow would be lost." What dimensional rift did I fall into? And what the fuck is going on? But I get away from that and just pick up my bags, and my loving wife picks me up from the airport. We go home. I somehow don't immediately fall asleep. And let everyone know I got home okay, and that was Momocon.